When Arthur Vance asked about the grand opening of his son's Napa Valley boutique resort, the project he had bankrolled with $600,000 of his life savings, his daughter-in-law, Vanessa, took a slow sip of her wine and answered casually. "Oh, that happened last month," she said, her voice dripping with indifference. "We only invited major investors and the elite. There wasn't really room for retirees." Arthur's chest tightened. In that suffocating moment, the cold truth finally settled over him. To Julian and Vanessa, he was not a father. He was just a disposable ATM machine. But the 68-year-old former structural engineer didn't yell or break down. Instead, he took a deep breath and quickly regained his composure. Staring quietly at the people who had bled him dry, he began to draft a plan in his mind. He would make sure they learned a brutal lesson about foundations and gravity that they would never, ever forget. Arthur did not utter a single word in response to her cruel dismissal. He simply picked up his heavy silver fork and meticulously cut a small piece of his steak. The ambient noise of the upscale restaurant seemed to completely fade away, leaving only the clinking of expensive silverware and the hollow, grating sound of Vanessa's voice. She continued to speak endlessly about the luxurious event, listing the wealthy socialites and powerful local politicians who had attended the exclusive gathering. She described the imported vintage champagne and the lavish floral arrangements with a sickening sense of pride, as if she had earned them through her own hard work. All the while, she never once looked at the quiet old man whose life savings had purchased those very things. Arthur chewed his food slowly, tasting absolutely nothing, while his analytical mind began to catalog every detail of the rotting structure sitting right before his eyes. He shifted his steady gaze across the candlelit table to his only son. Julian sat hunched forward, his eyes fixed firmly on his half-empty plate of roasted vegetables. The 35-year-old man did not offer a defense, did not issue an apology, and did not even possess the basic courage to meet his father's eyes. Arthur vividly remembered a time when Julian had been full of bright architectural ideas and genuine, burning passion. Now, looking at the obscenely expensive designer suit that hung awkwardly on his son's slumping shoulders, Arthur saw only a hollow facade masking deep decay. Julian had become a spineless puppet, entirely controlled and manipulated by the greedy woman sitting next to him. The realization brought a fresh, agonizing wave of parental grief, but Arthur brutally swallowed it down, letting the cold logic of a master engineer take its permanent place. The dreadful dinner dragged on for another agonizing hour, filled entirely with Vanessa's endless boasting about their newfound status among the Valley elite. When the waiter finally approached the table with the thick leather-bound check, Arthur calmly raised his weathered hand to intercept it. Vanessa smiled a practiced, entitled smile, fully expecting the old man to cover the extravagant meal just as he always did. Instead, Arthur quietly handed the waiter a crisp $100 bill, instructing him in a low voice to only charge for his own steak and sparkling water. The confident, greedy smirk instantly vanished from Vanessa's perfectly contoured face, replaced by a look of sheer, confused indignity. Julian finally looked up, his expression panicking slightly as he realized his credit cards were likely maxed out and he would have to pay for their expensive vintage wine and appetizers. Arthur stood up smoothly, buttoned his wool coat with practiced precision, and walked away from the table without saying a single goodbye. The night air was crisp and biting as Arthur walked alone to his modest sedan parked at the far edge of the illuminated lot. He slid behind the wheel, the familiar scent of old leather offering a small, quiet comfort against the chilling betrayal he had just endured. As he pulled onto the dark, winding highway leading away from the city lights, the profound silence of the car wrapped securely around him. For nearly 4 decades, he had taught university engineering students how to calculate load-bearing weights and identify catastrophic structural flaws. He knew that a building with a compromised foundation could look perfectly beautiful and pristine on the outside just moments before it collapsed completely. Julian and Vanessa had built an empire of lies and arrogance directly on top of his hard-earned retirement money. But they had fundamentally misunderstood the core materials they were working with. Arthur gripped the leather steering wheel, his large knuckles turning white in the dim, greenish glow of the dashboard lights. The grief of losing his son to overwhelming greed was incredibly heavy, but the absolute clarity of his new purpose was vastly heavier. He was not going to let them enjoy the luxury they had stolen through deceit and emotional manipulation. He needed to find the hidden blueprints of their financial lives, locate the invisible stress points, and strategically remove the vital supports holding them up. They thought they could effortlessly discard him because he was old, grieving, and supposedly useless. They failed to realize that the man who painstakingly poured the foundation also knew exactly how to trigger the controlled demolition. By the time Arthur parked his car in this quiet suburban driveway, the heartbroken father was gone, and the relentless engineer had fully taken over. 3 days later, Arthur navigates the winding roads of Napa Valley with a singular and quiet purpose. He parks his unassuming sedan on a dusty gravel turnout a quarter-mile down the road, perfectly shielded by a grove of tall oak trees. Reaching into his glove compartment, he takes out his heavy brass binoculars, a cherished relic from his bird-watching days with his late wife. Resting his thick forearms on the steering wheel to steady his gaze, he brings the resort into sharp and unforgiving focus. The grand wrought iron gates stand tall, proudly bearing the elegant gold leaf logo of the boutique hotel. It is a quiet Tuesday morning, a time when a new business should be diligently working through its early operational friction. Instead, the sprawling property radiates an aura of deeply entrenched and obnoxiously expensive routine. Arthur scans the main building, a sprawling modern farmhouse design featuring imported Italian stone and custom timber framing. His experienced eyes immediately begin calculating the staggering construction costs hidden in plain sight across the compound. The slate roof alone, laid in intricate overlapping patterns, represents a massive financial overrun from the initial budget Julian had nervously presented to him 2 years ago. The mature olive trees lining the immaculate driveway were not newly planted saplings but decades-old specimens, transplanted at a premium price that no fledgling hotel could reasonably justify. Even from a distance, the flawless patina on the custom copper rain gutters tells a very clear story of lavish and unchecked spending. He knows exactly how much $600,000 can buy in commercial construction, and this property easily doubles or triples that figure. The structural math is glaringly wrong, meaning the excess money had to come from somewhere hidden. A sleek midnight black European sports car suddenly roars up the private driveway, aggressively cutting off a local delivery van. The vehicle screeches to a halt near the main entrance, occupying a space clearly marked for valet service only. Vanessa steps out wearing oversized designer sunglasses and carrying a leather handbag that easily costs more than a full semester of college tuition. Arthur watches through the lenses as a young bellhop rushes forward to greet her, his posture tight with visible anxiety and fear. Vanessa waves her hand dismissively, not even bothering to look at the young man as she drops her car keys directly onto the pavement for him to retrieve. She strides through the massive glass front doors with the terrifying and unearned confidence of a queen surveying her conquered territory. 10 minutes later, Julian emerges from a side door near the loading dock, looking entirely out of place in his own establishment. He is wearing a rumpled button-down shirt, and his shoulders carry a heavy and defeated slump that makes him look 10 years older than his actual age. He is holding a wooden clipboard, arguing weakly with a vendor who is aggressively pointing at a thick stack of unpaid invoices. Julian rubs his temples in a gesture of profound exhaustion, nodding submissively before signing a piece of paper and walking slowly away. There is no trace of the ambitious young architect who had once sat at Arthur's kitchen table, vibrantly sketching out floor plans and dreaming of building a lasting family legacy. Julian simply looks like a broken hostage, trapped in a gilded cage built entirely with his father's stolen retirement funds. Arthur slowly lowers the brass binoculars, his jaw set in a hard and unforgiving line as the truth solidifies in his mind. The visual evidence completely confirms what his gut instincts have been screaming since the night of that dreadful dinner. The resort is absolutely not struggling to attract a wealthy clientele or find its footing in a highly competitive market. The guest parking lot is filled with high-end vehicles, and a large landscaping crew is meticulously manicuring an already perfect green lawn. The business is clearly generating substantial daily revenue, but that money is bleeding out through massive and invisible financial fractures. Vanessa is living a celebrity lifestyle completely decoupled from the actual profit margins of a new hotel, while Julian is left alone to manage the suffocating pressure of angry creditors. The cold reality of the situation settles deeply into Arthur's aging bones, completely eradicating any lingering fragments of paternal denial. He starts the engine of his quiet sedan, the gentle hum of the motor acting as a stark contrast to the roaring sports car he just witnessed. He no longer feels the fiery and blinding rage of a betrayed father. He feels the absolute and freezing clarity of an inspector discovering fatal code violations. To fix a failing structure, he do not simply paint over the cracks or gently ask the rotting wood to bear more weight. You must expose the rotten beams, rigorously document the structural failures, and prepare for a total and uncompromising demolition. Arthur puts the car in gear and drives away from the valley, knowing exactly what his next crucial step must be. Arthur drove back to his quiet suburban home, the absolute silence of the empty house greeting him like a familiar and heavy shadow. He bypassed the kitchen entirely and walked straight down the dimly lit hallway to a room he usually kept firmly closed. It was the private study of his late wife, Eleanor, a sacred space perfectly preserved since her sudden passing 4 years ago. The rich mahogany walls were lined with thick leather-bound law books and framed accolades honoring her decades of service as a respected family court judge. The faint, comforting scent of her favorite lavender polish still lingered in the stagnant air, bringing a sharp ache to his chest. Sitting slowly in her high-backed leather chair, Arthur closed his tired eyes and let the profound stillness of the room wash over him. He desperately needed her fierce intellect tonight far more than he needed any emotional comfort. In the quiet darkness, Arthur could almost hear the steady, authoritative voice that had guided him safely through 40 years of marriage. Eleanor had presided over hundreds of bitter divorces and vicious family disputes, witnessing the absolute worst of human greed and betrayal on a daily basis. Whenever Arthur had felt overwhelmed by the cruelty of the world, she would look at him with piercing, unapologetic clarity. She always told him that the truth is never fragile, and only the people desperately trying to hide it are fragile. Do not waste your precious energy on anger or grief when you are being actively deceived, she would say. Gather the hard evidence, build your undeniable case in complete silence, and let the cold facts deliver the final judgment. Her phantom words wrapped tightly around his breaking heart, systematically replacing the agonizing pain of a betrayed father with the chilling resolve of a master investigator. Drawing a deep breath, Arthur opened his heavy silver laptop and securely connected it to the encrypted home network. He navigated directly to the shared cloud storage folders where Julian had supposedly been uploading the resort renovation updates for the past 3 years. For many months, Arthur had only glanced casually at these digital files, foolishly trusting the optimistic summaries his son provided during their brief Sunday phone calls. Now, he opened a fresh master spreadsheet and began the arduous task of systematically downloading every single invoice, email thread, and bank statement. He applied the exact same methodical rigor he utilized when reviewing the critical load-bearing calculations of a massive suspension bridge. Every single number had to be verified, every random vendor had to be tracked, and every outgoing dollar had to be perfectly accounted for. The digital paper trail was vast and intentionally convoluted, but Arthur possessed the immense, unwavering patience of an old craftsman. As the silent hours ticked slowly past midnight, the glowing computer screen cast a pale blue light across Eleanor's immaculate mahogany desk. He quickly started noticing a distinct and highly disturbing pattern cleverly hidden within the seemingly mundane operational expenses. There were dozens of recurring electronic payments labeled generically as miscellaneous consulting or advanced marketing retainers. Individually, these specific transfers were small enough to easily avoid immediate suspicion, but aggregated over 36 months, they formed a massive, bleeding hemorrhage of capital. The vital construction money was being steadily siphoned out of the primary business budget and seamlessly funneled into obscure third-party accounts. He dug much deeper into the archived email threads, specifically searching for any financial correspondence forwarded directly by Vanessa. She had aggressively taken over the administrative duties early on, loudly claiming that Julian was far too busy managing the physical construction site to handle the paperwork. Arthur uncovered heavily redacted invoices from boutique design firms and luxury event planners that listed incredibly vague services attached to exorbitant price tags. He meticulously cross-referenced the exact dates of these massive payouts with the specific timeline of Vanessa's lavish lifestyle upgrades. A $50,000 wire transfer for abstract lobby artwork perfectly coincided with the exact week she purchased her brand new luxury sports car. The fundamental structural flaws of their grand financial deception were no longer safely hidden in the dark. By 4 in the morning, Arthur's aging eyes burned with severe exhaustion, but his completed master spreadsheet was a devastating and undeniable work of art. He had successfully mapped out the exact stress points where his life savings had been intentionally and maliciously compromised. The sheer volume of the calculated deceit was staggering, confirming beyond any doubt that this was absolutely not a simple case of a failing, mismanaged business. It was a highly coordinated and sustained financial assault executed flawlessly by his greedy daughter-in-law, while his weak son either looked the other way or actively participated. Arthur gently closed the laptop and watched the first pale light of a cold dawn creep slowly through the study window. He had finally found the hidden blueprints of their betrayal, and now he urgently needed a legal architect to help him rig the explosives. The bright morning sun finally broke through the heavy clouds, casting long shadows across the pristine mahogany desk in Eleanor's study. Arthur Vance sat perfectly still, staring at the completed master spreadsheet that clearly mapped out the systematic theft of his life savings. He reached for his phone with steady hands, knowing exactly who he needed to call to turn his raw data into a devastating weapon. He dialed the familiar Chicago number of his eldest daughter, Clara, a woman who had inherited both her mother's legal brilliance and her father's uncompromising spine. Unlike Julian, Clara had never asked her father for a single penny since the day she turned 18, building a formidable career as an independent audit lawyer entirely on her own merit. She was the one person in the world who could look at a shattered family foundation and immediately know how to draft the eviction notice. Clara answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and alert despite the early hour of the morning. Arthur did not waste their precious time with tearful pleasantries or emotional vulnerability, knowing his daughter operated best on cold logic. He methodically explained everything he had discovered during his sleepless night, laying out the bloated construction costs, the fake invoices, and the staggering financial discrepancies. He detailed the suspicious marketing retainers and described how Vanessa had purchased a ridiculously expensive luxury sports car the very same week a massive wire transfer cleared the business account. He kept his tone completely level, reporting the devastating betrayal of his only son as if he were simply reading a list of critical safety violations on a condemned building site. A heavy and dangerous silence stretched across the phone line as Clara absorbed the sheer magnitude of the financial abuse. She had never trusted her sister-in-law, always recognizing the greedy entitlement hiding just beneath Vanessa's polished country club exterior. For years, Clara had quietly suspected that Julian was drowning in debt to keep his demanding wife happy, but she never imagined they would dare to steal directly from their grieving father. A fierce, protective anger flared hot in her chest, but just like her parents, she instinctively locked her fury away behind a wall of tactical preparation. She told her father that his engineering spreadsheet was a brilliant starting point, but they needed an undeniable legal hammer to shatter Vanessa's illusions of absolute safety. Clara shifted seamlessly into her professional persona, outlining a ruthless and precise strategy to dismantle the fraudulent operation piece by piece. She promised to immediately hire a top-tier forensic accountant from her trusted network, a specialist who handled corporate embezzlement and offshore asset tracking. This professional would quietly infiltrate the deepest layers of the resort bank records, following every single stolen dollar without triggering any digital alarms. They needed to uncover exactly where the money was being hidden, who was actively signing the fraudulent checks, and how much debt Julian was secretly carrying in his own name. Clara assured her father that by the time this accountant finished their thorough investigation, they would possess enough hard evidence to bury Vanessa under a mountain of irrefutable legal consequences. The most vital component of Clara's counterattack, however, relied entirely on Arthur executing a perfect and unbroken campaign of silence. She explicitly warned him that he must cut off all direct communication with Julian and the resort immediately, without offering any explanations whatsoever. If his son called, the phone was to go straight to voicemail, and if Vanessa sent her usual passive-aggressive text messages, they were to be completely ignored. Any sudden demand for financial transparency or any display of paternal anger would instantly alert the parasites that their host had finally woken up. Arthur had to play the role of the tired, oblivious, and thoroughly defeated old man for just a few more weeks while the trap was being carefully set in the shadows. Arthur agreed to the strict terms of engagement without a single moment of hesitation, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over his exhausted body. For the first time since sitting at that humiliating dinner table in Napa Valley, the crushing weight of absolute isolation finally lifted from his weary shoulders. He was no longer just a betrayed father crying in the dark. He was the lead architect of a massive and highly coordinated demolition project. He thanked his brilliant daughter, feeling an immense swell of pride that Eleanor's fierce spirit lived on so strongly in Clara's heart. When he gently set the phone down on the desk, the quiet house no longer felt like a lonely tomb, but rather a secure command center preparing for an unavoidable war. For exactly 3 agonizing weeks, Arthur Vance maintained an absolute and suffocating radio silence. His mobile phone buzzed constantly with incoming calls from Julian and passive-aggressive text messages from Vanessa demanding to know why he was ignoring them. True to his strict agreement with Clara, he did not answer a single one of their frantic inquiries. He spent his days meticulously tending to his garden and his nights sitting quietly in Eleanor's pristine study, waiting for the forensic accountant to complete the digital excavation. The prolonged isolation tested his paternal instincts severely, but the cold discipline of his engineering background kept him firmly anchored to the mission. Finally, late on a rainy Thursday evening, a highly encrypted email from Clara arrived in his secure inbox. The attached document was titled simply as a comprehensive financial audit, but Arthur knew it was actually the detailed autopsy report of his son's ruined life. The glowing screen of the laptop illuminated Arthur's tired face as he opened the massive file. The forensic accountant Clara hired was a master of their craft, stripping away the glamorous facade of the boutique resort to reveal the rotting financial framework beneath. The preliminary summary was written in a cold, clinical language that offered no emotional cushioning whatsoever. It meticulously tracked every single incoming dollar and categorized every suspicious outgoing wire transfer with terrifying precision. Page after page of complex data graphs and bank routing numbers painted a bleak picture of a business that was actively being bled to death from the inside. Arthur adjusted his reading glasses, his heart pounding a slow and heavy rhythm as he navigated to the section highlighting the most critical structural failures. The first devastating revelation leaped off the screen with glaring clarity. The forensic trace had successfully hunted down the ultimate destination of the mysterious monthly marketing retainers Arthur had discovered earlier. The money was being steadily funneled into a newly registered limited liability company operating under the vague name of Apex Media Consulting. Digging through the incorporated public records, the accountant had uncovered the sole proprietor of this phantom agency. The owner was none other than Vanessa's older brother, a man who possessed absolutely no professional background in hospitality or digital advertising. Every single month, like clockwork, exactly $8,000 of Arthur's retirement capital was transferred into this shell account. There were absolutely no deliverables, no marketing campaigns, and no valid business contracts to justify the massive expenditure. Arthur leaned back in the heavy leather chair, feeling a sickening mixture of profound disgust and chilling realization. Vanessa was not simply overspending on luxury cars and expensive designer clothes to satisfy her own insatiable vanity. She was actively and methodically funneling his hard-earned wealth directly to her own blood relatives. It was a highly coordinated family grift executed right under Julian's oblivious nose. She was using the boutique resort as a personal ATM to enrich her brother, treating Arthur's life savings as an endless trough for her family to feed upon. The calculated malice required to sit at a dinner table and smile at the man you are actively robbing sent a shiver of pure ice down Arthur's spine. However, the second major finding documented in the audit was infinitely more dangerous and legally catastrophic. The accountant had uncovered a hidden secondary mortgage taken out directly against the commercial property of the resort. The principal amount of this undisclosed loan was a staggering $250,000, secured by exorbitant interest rates that no legitimate bank would ever approve. Arthur scrolled down with trembling fingers to view the scanned copy of the final loan agreement attached to the appendix. The signature at the bottom of the legal document clearly spelled out Julian Vance. But the accompanying forensic handwriting analysis provided by Clara's expert delivered a fatal blow to the narrative. The distinct pressure points, the angles of the cursive loops, and the hesitation marks proved beyond any reasonable doubt that the signature was a complete and utter forgery. The horrific implications of this forged document settled heavily over Arthur, suffocating the very breath in his lungs. Vanessa had maliciously secured $250,000 in high-interest debt, completely insulating herself from the legal fallout while hanging her husband out to dry. If the resort ultimately collapsed under the weight of this hidden financial cancer, Vanessa could easily walk away with the stolen cash tucked safely in her offshore accounts. Julian, on the other hand, would be left to face total personal bankruptcy, ruined credit, and potential criminal charges for defaulting on a fraudulent commercial loan. The glittering, glamorous lifestyle Vanessa loved to flaunt was built entirely on a foundation of Julian's impending destruction. She had turned the man Arthur loved into a disposable human shield. A profound and terrifying silence filled the mahogany study as the last remnants of Arthur's paternal grief burned away entirely. The sadness was completely gone, replaced by the hardening steel of absolute, righteous vengeance. He clicked the print button, listening to the rhythmic hum of the laser printer as it churned out the undeniable proof of Vanessa's treachery. He carefully gathered the warm pages, stacking them into a neat, perfectly aligned pile on Eleanor's desk. The hidden stress points of the enemy's fortress had been located, and the structural integrity of their lies was fully compromised. Arthur Vance stood up in the dark room, his posture straight and his mind perfectly clear, absolutely ready to plant the explosive charges and bring the entire corrupt building down to the ground. The stack of printed evidence sat heavily on the mahogany desk, but Arthur Vance felt a lingering, uneasy itch in the back of his mind. The forensic audit had brilliantly exposed the external financial bleeding, yet the forged signature on the massive loan hinted at a much closer, more intimate level of betrayal. A few months prior, noticing that some of his personal mail and small household items had been mysteriously rearranged, Arthur had quietly hired a technician to install hidden motion-activated cameras throughout the property. He had desperately hoped it was simply his aging memory playing cruel tricks on him, but the clinical precision of the audit now demanded a thorough verification of his own home. He opened a new tab on his encrypted browser and logged into the secure cloud server that stored the continuous video footage. His weathered hands hovered over the keyboard as he began to filter the recorded logs, specifically isolating the dates and times when he had been away for his routine grocery runs and doctor appointments. The digital search software churned for several tense minutes before flagging a highly unusual entry from exactly 2 weeks ago. The timestamp indicated a Tuesday afternoon, a period when Arthur was typically occupied with his weekly volunteer shift at the local botanical garden. He clicked the play button, his breath catching slightly in his throat as the high-definition hallway camera flickered to life on his screen. The heavy oak front door slowly swung open, revealing the familiar, slumping silhouette of his only son stepping cautiously into the quiet house. Julian looked incredibly nervous, his eyes darting frantically from side to side like a trapped animal as he moved silently down the corridor. He did not call out for his father, nor did he head toward the kitchen to leave a friendly note or a gift. Instead, Julian walked with absolute, undeniable purpose directly toward the master bedroom, the one place in the house he had absolutely no legitimate reason to enter. Arthur switched the video feed to the hidden camera positioned inconspicuously on the master bedroom bookshelf. The lens captured Julian walking straight toward the large oil painting that concealed the heavy steel wall safe. With practiced, sickening efficiency, the son swung the painting aside and entered the 6-digit numeric combination without a single moment of hesitation. Arthur felt a cold weight drop into his stomach because he had foolishly trusted Julian with that emergency code years ago, believing his son would only use it in a dire medical crisis. The heavy steel door clicked open, and Julian reached inside with trembling hands, pulling out the thick, banded stacks of emergency cash. It was exactly $20,000, money Arthur kept readily available for unforeseen property repairs or severe medical emergencies. Julian shoved the wads of currency hastily into his oversized jacket pockets, not even bothering to count the bills he was actively stealing from his own father. The theft of the cash was a devastating blow, but what Julian did next completely shattered the last remaining fragments of Arthur's paternal heart. His son reached deeper into the dark recess of the safe and pulled out a worn, dark blue velvet box. It was Eleanor's antique jewelry box, containing the priceless heirloom diamond earrings and the delicate pearl necklace she had proudly worn on their wedding day. Julian stared at the velvet box for a fleeting second, a brief flash of cowardly guilt crossing his pale face, before he ruthlessly shoved it into his pocket alongside the stolen cash. He closed the safe door, carefully repositioned the oil painting to its exact original spot, and practically sprinted out of the bedroom. The entire violation took less than 4 minutes from start to finish. Arthur sat completely paralyzed in his leather chair, watching the empty, silent bedroom on the monitor long after his son had vanished from the property. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the dimly lit study as the absolute horror of the betrayal fully washed over the old man. His own flesh and blood had not only stolen his hard-earned financial security but had actively desecrated the sacred memory of his late wife to pay for Vanessa's toxic vanity. Hot, bitter tears finally breached the rigid dams of Arthur's stoic composure, tracing slow, jagged paths down his deeply lined cheeks. He wept not just for the stolen money or the priceless heirlooms, but for the devastating death of the boy he had lovingly raised and cherished. Julian had willingly traded his fundamental dignity and his mother's legacy just to survive another month in the lavish, artificial prison his wife had constructed. The agonizing sorrow threatened to consume Arthur completely, pulling him down into an abyss of endless, paralyzing despair. But the tears were fleeting, and the intense period of mourning concluded as abruptly as it had begun. Arthur wiped his wet face with the back of his hand, taking a long, ragged breath that slowly steadied into a rhythm of absolute, terrifying calm. The weeping father systematically retreated into the deep recesses of his mind, permanently replaced by the cold, calculating intellect of the master engineer. He downloaded the high-definition video files to a secure, encrypted flash drive, placing it deliberately on top of the forensic audit report. The structural assessment was now officially complete, and the evidence of catastrophic moral failure was absolutely irrefutable. There was no more room for hesitation, no more space for misplaced family loyalty, and absolutely no chance for quiet forgiveness. Arthur Vance turned off the computer, his heart turned to solid ice, completely ready to rig the final explosive charges and trigger the demolition. Arthur Vance locked himself in his office for the entire weekend, preparing for the demolition of the dilapidated building that the traitors had painstakingly constructed. The first step in any controlled demolition was to completely cut off the power supply and disable all escape routes. As the nominal owner of the original $600,000 investment, he still held ultimate legal control over several key escrow accounts of the resort. Under Clara's sharp guidance from Chicago, Arthur meticulously drafted legal documents requiring the bank to immediately freeze all incoming and outgoing funds from these accounts. He cited suspected serious financial fraud, attaching a small portion of data from the forensic audit report as irrefutable evidence. Bank employees quickly accepted the documents and activated the emergency freeze procedure within 24 hours. Vanessa and Julian would have no idea that the only financial lifeline sustaining their lavish lifestyle had been completely cut off. With the financial trap perfectly laid in the shadows, Arthur calmly moved on to the next step: psychological manipulation. He knew all too well that Vanessa was an insatiably greedy woman, always eager to seize everything without breaking a sweat. To lure these greedy rats into the trap he had prepared, he needed a bait large and tempting enough to completely blind them. Arthur took out his cell phone and opened the group chat window that he had resolutely ignored for the past 3 weeks. He slowly typed each word, deliberately maintaining a tone of weariness, resignation, and utter defeat. The message was incredibly brief but carried immense weight for those craving power and money. He requested Julian and Vanessa to be present at the resort's office at 3 p.m. next Tuesday to discuss signing the papers transferring full ownership of the hotel to the couple. Less than 5 minutes after the message was sent, Arthur's phone screen lit up with a reply. It wasn't from his own son, but from Vanessa, the woman gloating over her ultimate victory. She replied in a falsely sweet tone, expressing overwhelming joy and promising that they would meticulously prepare everything for the meeting. Arthur looked at the words on the screen with a cold smile on his lips, sensing the pathetic self-satisfaction in his daughter-in-law's foolish complacency. She truly believed his prolonged silence was a sign of surrender, that he was exhausted and had decided to relinquish all his assets in exchange for peace in his old age. They had become so accustomed to exploiting his labor that they had completely lost their vigilance against the dangers lurking ahead. The building of lies has begun to shake, but those living inside are still busy celebrating. In the days leading up to the final confrontation, Arthur began assembling and reorganizing his entire arsenal in his office. He placed the thick forensic audit report into a black leather briefcase he'd used during his university teaching years. Receipts proving the flow of dirty money into Vanessa's brother's shell company were carefully secured with a shiny metal clip. Next came a copy of the $250,000 subprime mortgage agreement, along with handwriting analysis proving his daughter-in-law's blatant forgery. Finally, he fully charged his tablet and copied the security video of Julian stealing Eleanor's cash and jewelry box onto the main screen. Each item placed in a briefcase carried the destructive power of an explosive device strategically placed at structural weak points. An engineer's preparation leaves no room for emotional missteps, and Arthur had learned to lock his heart away. He spent hours rehearsing what he would say, choosing each word to be as sharp as a surgical knife. There would be no angry shouts, no pleading tears, and certainly no opportunity for evasive lies. Clara had also assembled a remote legal team, ready to intervene immediately if Vanessa attempted to threaten or dispose of assets. He was turning the resort's office into a miniature courtroom, where he would be both the prosecutor and the judge delivering the final verdict. All escape routes for Julian and Vanessa had been completely sealed off by irrefutable evidence. As darkness fell on the eve of their fateful meeting, Arthur sat alone in the quiet, empty living room. The silent house seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the impending storm that would sweep through the valley. Gone were the weak tears, the anguish of a grieving father, only the intense focus of a man wielding justice remained. He recalled Eleanor's teachings that truth was the ultimate weapon, unbreakable by any justification. They had ruthlessly stolen her most precious memento, and he would use that very truth to shatter their extravagant illusions. Tomorrow morning, he would drive back to Napa Valley not as an investor or a father, but as the most devastating financial nightmare they had ever faced. The trap was set, and the countdown to their downfall had officially begun. Precisely at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, the Napa Valley sky was a brilliant blue and bathed in sunlight, a breathtaking scene yet a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere building inside the resort's management office. Arthur Vance had driven there early. He sat silently in a leather chair opposite a solid oak desk, his rough hands clasped neatly on the tabletop. His old, black leather briefcase lay quietly beside him, like a ticking time bomb, programmed to explode at any moment. He showed no sign of restlessness, not even glancing at the wall clock. He simply closed his eyes and waited with the cold patience of a master engineer preparing to witness the collapse of the flawed project he himself had invested in. The sound of high heels clicking on the marble hallway broke the silence. The heavy wooden doors swung open with confident force. Vanessa entered first, carrying the pungent scent of expensive perfume and the arrogant air of someone certain of her complete victory. She wore a sophisticated, cut-out silk dress, slung over her shoulder an expensive crocodile leather handbag, and a carefully calculated smile on her luscious red lips that conveyed both pity and triumph. Following closely behind her haughty figure was Julian. His only son looked far more haggard and worn out than he had at the family dinner a few weeks earlier. Julian's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, his shoulders slumped as if burdened by an immense, invisible weight. He deliberately avoided his father's gaze, trudging forward and standing timidly beside his domineering wife. "Hello, Dad," Vanessa said first, her tone artificially sweet and full of superiority. "We've had our lawyers prepare all the necessary legal paperwork to complete the transfer. We understand you're incredibly tired and exhausted these days. Deciding to step back, relinquish your burdens, and hand over full control of this resort to us is truly a very wise choice for your later years." Arthur didn't respond to the insincere greeting. He didn't smile in agreement, nor did he show any anger or resentment. The silence grew thick and suffocating. Vanessa's smug smile faltered slightly, giving way to a fleeting look of confusion. Arthur's silence was nothing like the resigned attitude of an old man she had expected. It was more like the deathly, terrifying stillness before a storm. Slowly and deliberately, Arthur pulled the black briefcase toward him. The click of the metal lock echoed dryly and jarringly in the enclosed room. He opened the briefcase, took out a neatly clipped file, and placed it in the center of the desk. His hand was steady, each movement decisive, and there was not a trace of the trembling of age or emotional weakness. "Apex Media Consulting," Arthur said in a flat, cold voice, devoid of any emotion in his tone. He gently pulled the first invoice from the file and slid it across the wooden table toward Vanessa. "A business legally registered under your brother's name. $8,000 a month is transferred directly from this hotel's operating funds into that personal account, continuously and without interruption for the past 3 years. No specific service contracts were signed, no work reports were submitted, and no advertising campaigns were conducted. It's entirely a secret money pipeline, directly draining the blood from my retirement investment account to fill your family's pockets." Vanessa's heavily made-up eyes widened, her pupils contracting in utter horror at the sight of the invoice. The calm and composed facade she had painstakingly cultivated instantly crumbled. She hastily reached for the paper, her meticulously manicured fingers trembling. Julian, standing beside her, was startled, his face turning deathly pale as he stared at the bold, clear numbers on the white paper. He turned sharply to his wife, his dry lips stammering incoherently. "Wait, this is a terrible misunderstanding," Vanessa began, trying to regain some control of the situation slipping from her grasp. "Your brother is secretly helping us build our brand image on social media platforms. You don't understand anything about how digital marketing works these days. You can't just look at some meaningless numbers and immediately accuse us. We're doing everything for the development of this place." Arthur didn't bother arguing or refuting that ridiculous excuse. He ignored his daughter-in-law's weak plea and continued to reach deeper into his briefcase. This time, he pulled out a much thicker stack of documents, densely marked with bright red fluorescent arrows from the forensic auditor. He gently placed it on top of the original invoice with just enough pressure to create a threatening sound. "Then use your brilliant marketing knowledge to explain this subprime mortgage agreement to me," Arthur said, his gaze as sharp as a dagger piercing Vanessa's panicked eyes. $250,000 in cash borrowed under the resort's name, at an exorbitant interest rate no legitimate bank would dare approve. The entire financial risk of this enormous debt has been cleverly shifted onto Julian's shoulders. Julian stared wide-eyed at the thick stack of documents, his jaw trembling. "Mortgage loan? What do you mean, Dad? I didn't sign any mortgage loan. Vanessa, what the hell is going on? Where are those $250,000? Look closely at the signature on the last page, Julian," Arthur said, his voice maintaining an absolute calm but undeniably lethal tone. "A leading signature expert from Chicago has confirmed in writing that the pen pressure and angles are definitely not yours. Someone in this room meticulously copied your handwriting, putting you at risk of irreparable personal bankruptcy and potentially years in prison for financial fraud, while the mastermind remains completely unpunished and is ready to abscond with the money." The confusion and fear in the room officially turned into an uncontrollable chaos. Vanessa took a long step back, her breath becoming ragged and broken. Her defenses quickly shifted to offense in a fit of extreme panic. She slammed her hands down on the wooden table, shouting loudly to conceal the humiliating truth being exposed. "What the hell do you know?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice a shrill, shattering the false elegance she always maintained. "You're just an old, outdated fool. We've poured our sweat and tears into this damned project. That money is just a well-deserved reward for the effort I've put in. Julian is too weak and cowardly to handle it himself. If I hadn't stepped in to sort things out, this dilapidated hotel would have gone bankrupt long ago. You have no right to sit there and judge me. Arthur slowly leaned back in his leather chair, silently observing his daughter-in-law's frantic and pathetic performance. Her rage didn't faze or frighten him. It only served to clearly demonstrate that the foundation of her deception had completely crumbled beyond repair. Vanessa's screaming justifications echoed through the office walls, but were utterly powerless to erase the weight of the irrefutable evidence laid bare on his desk. Their illusory mansion was shattering into countless pieces, and Arthur knew all too well that the most powerful, most ruthless bomb lay dormant at the bottom of his black briefcase. Arthur offered no response to Vanessa's ear-piercing screams. He let her insults and feigned anger echo against the oak walls, reverberating throughout the enclosed room like a ridiculous farce. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, her chest heaving with rage and fear evident in her eyes, Arthur slowly reached into his black briefcase once more. This time, he didn't pull out any paper documents to prove financial wrongdoing. Instead, he took out a tablet encased in leather, its gleaming glass reflecting the room's cold light. He unlocked the device with a gentle swipe, turned the volume to maximum, and silently turned the screen toward the two people standing across the table. His rough fingers pressed the video play button without any explanation or accusation. All lies would now be utterly crushed by irrefutable photographic evidence. The high-resolution screen instantly displayed the familiar hallway scene in Arthur's own house, with a clear timestamp showing a Tuesday afternoon 2 weeks ago. Julian stood frozen, his eyes wide with horror as he saw himself sneaking into the house like a professional thief, meticulously searching every corner. The video was silent, devoid of spoken words, only the rustling of footsteps and the anxious gasps of an intruder attempting to commit a crime. When the image shifted to the master bedroom, capturing Julian expertly opening the safe and stuffing stacks of emergency cash worth $20,000 into his jacket pocket, his body began to tremble violently. But the most cruel moment was when Julian reached for the dark blue velvet box containing Eleanor's priceless keepsake jewelry. Julian's fragile facade crumbled instantly when he witnessed his own depravity exposed in the cruel light of truth. Unable to bear witnessing his own abhorrent betrayal any longer, Julian collapsed to his knees on the cold marble floor of the office. He clutched his pale face with trembling hands, choked sobs escaping his throat, erupting into a pathetic and desperate wail. It wasn't the cry of a grown man repenting for his heinous crimes, but the cry of a spoiled child stripped of his last remaining shield. He mumbled broken apologies, saying he was cornered, that the debt collectors had threatened his safety, and that he had no choice but to steal from his family. Arthur sat motionless in his chair, his cold gray eyes fixed on his son writhing on the floor, a pang of sorrow in his heart, but his absolute reason forbade him from reaching out to help him. This dilapidated foundation needed to crumble completely to the very bottom before it could be rebuilt from scratch. In stark contrast to Julian's collapse, Vanessa's reaction was a chillingly cold and ruthless transformation. She didn't stoop to comfort her husband, who lay fallen at her feet, nor did she show any pity or shock at his despicable theft. Instead, her eyes gleamed with utter contempt as she looked down at her partner of many years. She recoiled a few steps, as if standing near Julian would stain her expensive silk dress and damage her falsely noble image. She began to hurl venomous insults, calling Julian the most cowardly, useless, and pathetic person she had ever known in her life. Vanessa screamed that she had to single-handedly support an entire vast estate, while her idiotic husband was stealing the old, worn-out jewelry of a deceased old woman instead of seeking larger investments. Her cruelty and extreme greed were laid bare, stripped of any elegant facade. To her, Julian had never been a husband, but merely an easy tool to enter the glamorous world of high society. Just as the chaos and humiliation reached their peak, the large television screen on the wall behind Arthur suddenly lit up. Clara, Arthur's eldest daughter and a shrewd auditing lawyer from Chicago, appeared vividly in the background via a prearranged video call. She sat in her luxurious office, her icy gaze fixed on Vanessa like a judge about to pronounce judgment. In a sharp, authoritative tone, Clara began to read aloud the emergency asset freeze order that the court had just officially approved. She announced that all bank accounts related to the resort, including the secondary credit cards Vanessa was using for extravagant spending on designer goods, had been completely frozen. Any attempts to transfer the money to her brother's account had also been thwarted by financial authorities since dawn. Vanessa froze in place, her face turning from flushed with anger to deathly pale as she realized she had lost everything in the blink of an eye. Clara gave her no chance to react or offer any excuses, immediately issuing an ultimatum in a tone that brooked no negotiation. The lawyer demanded that Vanessa place all the keys to her luxury sports car, her resort access card, and all of her company's credit cards on the wooden table immediately. She ordered Vanessa to leave the building empty-handed, without taking any possessions or items purchased with Arthur's hard-earned money. If Vanessa refused to cooperate or attempted to cause a disturbance, the local police, who had been notified in advance, would arrive within 5 minutes to arrest her and take her to the station for fraud and forgery. Vanessa's glamorous sandcastle has officially been shattered by the waves of justice, leaving no trace of her arrogance. The heavy oak doors slammed shut with a deafening thud, completely severing Vanessa from the extravagant empire she had so ruthlessly manipulated. The lingering scent of her expensive perfume hung in the stagnant air of the office, a toxic reminder of the vanity that had nearly destroyed their family. On the large television screen, Clara gave her father a single, respectful nod before silently disconnecting the video call, leaving the room in absolute, suffocating quiet. Arthur Vance slowly turned his cold, calculating gaze away from the closed door and looked down at the pathetic figure still crumpled on the marble floor. Julian was weeping openly, his expensive designer suit hopelessly wrinkled, his entire body trembling under the crushing weight of his monumental cowardice. The false foundation of his glamorous life had been entirely pulverized, leaving nothing but raw, bleeding regret in its wake. Arthur stood up from the leather chair, his movements deliberate and unhurried as he walked around the massive wooden desk. He did not offer a comforting hand to help his son up, nor did he utter a single word of traditional paternal sympathy. He simply ordered Julian to stand up and face the devastating consequences of his actions like a grown man. Julian struggled to his feet, his face red and swollen, his bloodshot eyes completely unable to meet the steady, unforgiving stare of the retired engineer. Arthur spoke in a low, resonant voice, reminding Julian that he had not only facilitated the theft of his father's life savings but had actively desecrated his dead mother's memory to appease a parasite. The stark truth cut through the silent room like a serrated blade, striking the deepest, most vulnerable core of Julian's ruined conscience. The time for soft words and blind parental coddling had permanently expired, replaced by the severe, structural discipline required to rebuild the collapsed life. Arthur reached into the dark depths of his briefcase one final time and extracted a freshly drafted legal contract, setting it firmly on the polished wood. He informed his son that the boutique resort was effectively dead, completely suffocated by secret debts, forged mortgages, and gross operational incompetence. He laid out the absolute reality of the immediate future, making it painfully clear that Julian was staring directly down the barrel of total financial ruin and potential criminal prosecution. However, because Arthur was still a father who loved his son fiercely, he was offering exactly two distinct paths out of this dark, collapsing room. Neither option was going to be easy, and neither option offered the luxury of unearned forgiveness. Arthur detailed the first choice with the surgical precision of a man outlining a controlled demolition. Julian could take a certified cashier check for $10,000 right now, walk out the front door, and attempt to survive entirely on his own. If he chose this path, he would bear the full, crushing weight of the forged $250,000 loan by himself, facing the aggressive creditors and the looming bankruptcy without a single shred of family support. Most importantly, Arthur warned, taking the money meant their relationship would be permanently severed, and Julian must never refer to him as a father again. It was the ultimate path of total isolation, the final, devastating consequence of choosing cowardice and greed over family accountability. Then, Arthur presented the second, grueling alternative, staring intensely into his son's terrified eyes. Julian must immediately sign over 100% of his equity and ownership rights in the resort to his father, surrendering the very title he had foolishly paraded around town. He would remain on the property not as a visionary architect or a wealthy owner, but as the lowest-ranking employee on the entire payroll. He would work the grueling graveyard shift as a janitor and housekeeper, scrubbing the marble toilets, washing the soiled bed linens, and emptying the trash cans for absolute minimum wage. Every single spare cent he earned would go directly toward repaying his massive debts and replacing the sacred heirlooms he had so casually stolen from the wall safe. It was a severe sentence of profound humiliation and backbreaking physical labor, designed specifically to strip away his toxic vanity and force him to understand the true value of an honest dollar. Julian stared blankly at the legal document resting on the desk, the harsh reality of his monumental downfall finally settling deep into his aching bones. He thought about Vanessa, who had viciously insulted him and fled the moment the stolen luxury vanished, leaving him to take the fall. Then he looked at his aging father, a man he had deeply wronged, who was now offering him a brutal but genuine lifeline out of the wreckage. A fresh wave of tears spilled down Julian's cheeks, but this time they were not tears of pathetic self-pity, but rather the agonizing tears of true, profound remorse. With shaking hands, he reached for the heavy silver pen lying on the desk and signed his name on the dotted line, completely surrendering his fake empire. He looked at his father, his voice breaking into a quiet whisper, and accepted the janitor position, taking his very first agonizing step toward genuine redemption. The next 6 months dragged on with a slowness and cruelty Julian had never experienced in his sheltered life. Expensive designer suits and gleaming leather shoes were permanently relegated to the back of his mind, replaced by a rough gray janitor's uniform and cheap flat shoes. His night shift began at 11 o'clock at night and ended at dawn. Julian had to scrub the high-end porcelain toilets, change the pristine white bed sheets, and empty countless foul-smelling garbage bags from the luxurious hotel rooms. His hands, once accustomed to holding pens and sketching architectural designs, were now calloused, cracked, and bleeding from the industrial cleaning chemicals. Physical exhaustion struck him like sledgehammers, but it was the only antidote to the vanity that had seeped into his blood. The worst humiliation didn't come from the arduous manual labor, but from the scornful glances of those who had once been his subordinates. The receptionists and housekeeping staff, who had once bowed their heads to Vanessa's scolding and received orders from Julian, now openly looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Sometimes, they deliberately left unsightly stains or cast cold stares as they passed him in the deserted hallway. Julian didn't resist, didn't utter a word of complaint, and didn't dare lift his head to defend himself against his misery. He silently swallowed all the insults, accepting the deserved punishment for the heinous crimes he had committed. Every drop of sweat that fell onto the marble floor was a silent confession, a desperate attempt to wash away the disgrace that had clung to his family's name. Throughout those 6 challenging months, Arthur Vance rarely spoke directly to his son beyond dry, work-related orders. He spent most of his days in the management office, working alongside Clara and the financial experts to clean up the enormous mess Vanessa had left behind. However, through the security camera screens in the corner of the room, The old engineer quietly observed every turning point in Julian's transformation. He saw the initial awkwardness gradually replaced by patience, saw his son clean a tiny stain on the carpet himself without needing any prompting. Arthur absolutely did not intervene to protect his son from the contempt of the staff, because he knew that respect could not be given but had to be earned through effort. Julian's fragile and superficial facade was slowly peeling away, giving way to a much more solid and genuine foundation of character. When the illusions of wealth and power were completely shattered, Julian began to find a strange peace in his own utter exhaustion. No longer subjected to Vanessa's venomous whispers, his mind became calmer and clearer than ever. He realized that his days of false luxury had been nothing more than a long nightmare, a constant lie to cover up his cowardice. Now, the meager $15 an hour was the first truly clean money he had earned through his own hard work. Each bill went directly into Arthur's debt repayment account, slowly making up for the $20,000 in sacred mementos that had been stolen. The hard labor had truly cleansed his soul, transforming a pathetic parasite into a man who took responsibility for his own life. On a cold early winter morning, as Julian finished his tiring shift and prepared to pack up, Arthur entered the staff break room. Without the usual reprimands, the 68-year-old silently placed 2 steaming cups of black coffee on the cheap plastic table. Julian hesitantly approached, carefully taking the coffee cups with his calloused, rough hands. Father and son sat opposite each other in a prolonged silence, but the atmosphere no longer held the coldness or resentment of their previous confrontation. There were no empty apologies or weak tears, only the warmth of the coffee and a profound understanding conveyed through their eyes. The foundations of their family home had once been completely shattered, but in this quiet moment, the first new bricks were truly laid with unwavering firmness. 3 years passed since that quiet morning in the break room with the 2 cups of black coffee. The boutique resort in Napa Valley no longer resembled the bleeding, hollow shell it had been under Vanessa and her endless vanity. Under the meticulous restructuring orchestrated by Clara and my own careful oversight, the business had finally found its true footing. The occupancy rates remained consistently high, the fraudulent loans were entirely paid off, and the genuine profits were reinvested back into the property. Julian did not magically return to the top overnight, but he earned his way out of the shadows through sheer, unrelenting hard work. He spent a full year scrubbing toilets and carrying luggage before I allowed him to even touch the scheduling software or speak to the vendors. Today, Julian stands in the main lobby not as a frightened puppet, but as the fully appointed operations manager of a thriving enterprise. His hands still carry the rough calluses from his time on the cleaning crew, a permanent physical reminder of the brutal lessons he had to learn. He looks people directly in the eye now, carrying himself with a quiet, grounded dignity that no expensive designer suit could ever buy. He repaid every single dollar he stole from the emergency safe, and he returned a replica of Eleanor's jewelry box, having spent months tracking down similar antique pieces. As for Vanessa, she currently lives in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city, drowning under the massive personal debts she accumulated after her brother cut all ties with her. She works a grueling retail job folding clothes for minimum wage, completely erased from the luxurious world she once tried to steal. On a crisp Tuesday afternoon, I walked slowly through the quiet, winding paths of the local cemetery until I reached the familiar marble headstone. I laid a fresh bouquet of white lilies down on the manicured grass, tracing the carved letters of my beloved wife's name with a weathered finger. I sat on the cold stone bench nearby and told Eleanor everything that had transpired over the past 3 turbulent years. I told her how the beautiful house our son tried to build had been rotting from the inside out, infected by greed and terrible cowardice. I told her how I had to become a ruthless engineer, tearing the entire structure down to the dirt just to save the boy we both loved so dearly. The wind rustled gently through the ancient oak trees, and in that profound silence, I felt her familiar, approving warmth settle deeply into my weary bones. "We are finally safe," I whispered into the cool evening breeze, knowing that the new foundation we poured together would never crack again. This story stands as a solemn testament to the absolute necessity of holding the people we love accountable for their actions. True parental love is not about blindly funding their mistakes or shielding them from the harsh, natural consequences of their own greed. Sometimes, the most profound act of devotion a father can offer is a demolition notice, forcing a child to hit rock bottom so they can learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. A family built on lies and manipulation will inevitably collapse under its own weight, but a family rebuilt on honesty, hard labor, and genuine remorse can withstand any storm. If this journey of betrayal, tough love, and ultimate redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. I invite you to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on these daily stories of justice and the enduring strength of the human spirit. I would love to hear how this story made you feel and how it might relate to the complex realities of your own family life. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, as I truly want to listen to the feelings coming from the very bottom of your heart. I wish everyone watching this video robust health, a joyful life, and profound peace every single day. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.